There's a psychological pattern so subtle, so deeply woven into how we interact with the world that most people live their entire lives without recognizing it. And here's the disturbing part. This pattern doesn't just influence who you attract into your life, it practically sends out a signal to the exact people who will drain you, manipulate you, and leave you questioning your own reality. I'm talking about behaviors that seem completely innocent, harmless even. Things you've been taught are virtues, but to someone with toxic intent, these behaviors are like a beacon in the dark. What if I told you that the very traits you pride yourself on, your empathy, your willingness to give people second chances, your ability to see the good in others, might be the exact reasons you keep ending up in the same exhausting, soul-crushing dynamics? Stay with me, because what we're about to uncover doesn't just explain why toxic people keep showing up, it reveals the hidden psychology behind why they choose you. If understanding the hidden psychology behind human behavior fascinates you, if you want to see beneath the surface of why people do what they do, subscribe, because what's coming next will shift your entire perspective on the relationships in your life. Let me paint you a picture. You're at work, and a colleague accuses you of something you didn't do. Maybe they say you didn't pull your weight on a project, or that you were dismissive in a meeting. Here's where it gets interesting. Your immediate response isn't anger. It's not even defensiveness in the traditional sense. Instead, you find yourself explaining, in detail. You're walking them through your thought process, your intentions, the timeline of events. You're offering context, background, your emotional state at the time. You think you're being reasonable, mature. You're giving them the full picture so they can understand the truth. But here's what's actually happening in that moment. You're teaching them something. You're teaching them that when they apply pressure, you fold. Not in an obvious way. You fold inward. You become smaller. You begin justifying your existence in that space. And toxic people? They file that information away because they've just learned that you're someone who will absorb blame, who will work overtime to prove your worth, who believes that if you just explain yourself clearly enough, people will treat you fairly. That's not how toxic people operate. They're not looking for clarity. They're looking for supply, and you just showed them you're willing to provide it. Here's another pattern. You set a boundary. Maybe you tell a friend you can't lend them money anymore, or you tell a family member you won't be available every weekend. They push back, not aggressively, just enough. They look hurt. They bring up a time you needed them. They make you feel like you're being cold, selfish, unreasonable. And here's where the hidden behavior emerges. You soften the boundary. You add exceptions. Well, if it's an emergency, or I guess if it's really important. You think you're being compassionate, flexible, human. But what you've actually done is teach them that your boundaries are negotiable. That if they apply the right emotional pressure, guilt, disappointment, wounded pride, you'll move the line. Toxic people don't respect boundaries, but more importantly, they have a sixth sense for people who don't fully respect their own boundaries, who see boundaries as mean rather than necessary, who believe that love means having no limits. And once they know your boundaries are suggestions rather than rules, you've just handed them the blueprint for how to control you. Now, before we go deeper, I need you to understand something crucial about human behavior. We're all constantly broadcasting information about ourselves, not through what we say, through what we tolerate. There's a concept in psychology called social signaling. We signal our status, our values, our boundaries through micro-behaviors. A toxic person entering your life isn't making random choices. They're reading your signals. They're watching how you respond to discomfort, to conflict, to being undervalued. And here's the part that's hard to hear. If you keep attracting toxic people, it's not because you're broken or because you have bad luck. It's because somewhere in your behavioral patterns, you're signaling that you're a safe target, that you won't fight back effectively, that you'll prioritize their comfort over your own dignity. This isn't your fault. Most of these patterns were installed in childhood, reinforced by culture, praised as virtues, but they're costing you in ways you're only beginning to recognize. But here's what most people never realize, and this is where it gets darker. These behaviors don't just attract toxic people. They're actually designed to keep you in the relationship long after you should have left. The same patterns that draw them in are the patterns that make it almost impossible for you to walk away. Let me show you what I mean. You've probably heard of fight, flight, or freeze, but there's a fourth response that doesn't get talked about nearly enough: fawning. Fawning is when you respond to threat not by running or fighting, but by appeasing, by making yourself useful, agreeable, indispensable, by becoming whatever the other person needs you to be. And here's the psychological twist. Fawning doesn't feel like fear. It feels like kindness. It feels like empathy. It feels like being a good person. You see someone struggling and you jump in to fix it. You see someone upset and you immediately ask what you did wrong. You sense tension in a room and you become the emotional shock absorber, lightening the mood, smoothing things over, making sure everyone feels okay. Sounds healthy, right? Sounds emotionally intelligent. But let's dig beneath the surface. When you fawn, you're operating from a subconscious belief that your safety depends on other people's emotional state. That if you can just keep them happy, regulated, satisfied, you'll be safe, you'll be valued, you'll be kept around. And toxic people can smell this from a mile away, because a fawner is someone who will take responsibility for emotions that aren't theirs, who will manage the unmanageable, who will stay in chaos and call it loyalty. I need you to sit with this question. How often do you do things not because you want to, but because you're afraid of how someone will react if you don't? That's not generosity, that's survival mode dressed up as virtue. Here's another behavior that seems healthy on the surface but becomes a trap: giving people the benefit of the doubt. Someone cancels on you last minute again. They say something cruel but claim they were just joking. They cross a line but follow it up with an apology that sounds sincere enough. And you think, well, maybe they're going through something. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. Maybe they didn't mean it that way.
You pride yourself on this, on not being judgmental, on understanding that people are complex, that everyone has bad days, that nobody's perfect. But here's the hidden cost. While you're extending understanding, you're ignoring data. You're dismissing a pattern because you're focusing on individual incidents. Toxic people rely on this. They rely on your willingness to see each violation as an isolated event rather than part of a larger picture. They know that if they can keep you focused on their intentions, what they meant to do, you won't pay attention to their impact, what they actually did. There's a concept in behavioral psychology called intermittent reinforcement. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. You don't get rewarded every time, just sometimes, just enough to keep you playing. Toxic people are masters of this. They're awful, then wonderful, cruel, then apologetic, distant, then intensely present. And every time they're good, you think, see, this is who they really are. The other stuff was just a rough patch. But here's the truth. People show you who they are through patterns, not moments. And if you keep giving them the benefit of the doubt, you're not being fair. You're being blind. These patterns we're uncovering, the subtle ways we teach people how to treat us, the behaviors we think are strengths but become vulnerabilities. If you want to understand more of what drives human behavior at this level, hit subscribe, because the psychology gets even more revealing from here. Now we need to talk about something that might sting a little: the savior complex. You see someone who's broken, struggling, misunderstood, and something in you lights up. You think, I can help them. I can be the one who finally sees their potential. I can love them in a way that heals them. This feels noble. It feels like love at its purest. You're not giving up on them when everyone else has. You're believing in them. But let's examine what's really happening beneath that narrative. When you're drawn to people who need fixing, you're not actually seeing them. You're seeing a project, a purpose, a way to prove your own worth. Because if you can save them, if you can be the one who makes the difference, then you matter. Then you're special. Then you're enough. Toxic people intuitively understand this about you. They learn quickly that you're more invested when they're falling apart than when they're stable. That your attention, your energy, your presence increases in proportion to their crisis. So what do you think they do? They create crisis. They stay broken. They improve just enough to give you hope, then relapse just enough to keep you engaged. And you? You stay because leaving would mean admitting that you couldn't save them, that your love wasn't enough, that you failed. But here's the psychological reality you need to confront. You cannot love someone into health. You cannot care someone into change. And when you try, you're not operating from strength. You're operating from your own unmet need to feel necessary. Have you ever noticed that you feel most alive, most needed, most valuable when someone is depending on you? That's not love. That's codependency wearing love's mask. Let's talk about what happens when you avoid conflict at all costs. Someone disrespects you. Instead of addressing it directly, you hint. You hope they'll notice. You express your frustration indirectly, maybe through tone or by withdrawing or by complaining to someone else.
You tell yourself you're keeping the peace. You're being mature. You're not making a big deal out of nothing. But what you're actually doing is training people that they can mistreat you without consequence. Because in the absence of direct confrontation, they get to decide what happened. They get to minimize it, reframe it, or pretend it didn't happen at all. Toxic people thrive in relationships with conflict-avoidant people because they know they can push and push and push, and you won't push back. Not clearly, not forcefully. You'll absorb it, internalize it, accommodate it. And here's the deeper psychological pattern. Your conflict avoidance isn't about keeping peace, it's about fear. Fear of anger, yours or theirs. Fear of being seen as difficult, demanding, too much. Fear that if you speak up, you'll lose the relationship. But let me ask you something. If speaking your truth costs you a relationship, what were you actually in? A relationship requires two people who can handle reality. If the only way to maintain connection is by hiding your real feelings, you're not in a relationship. You're in a hostage situation. Toxic people need you to stay silent about what they do. Your conflict avoidance is their permission slip. Here's one of the most dangerous patterns. Empathy without boundaries. You feel what other people feel. When they're in pain, you hurt. When they're anxious, you absorb it. You can walk into a room and immediately sense the emotional temperature. This is a gift. Genuinely, high empathy is a profound form of intelligence. But here's where it becomes a vulnerability. When you feel someone's pain so deeply, you become willing to sacrifice yourself to alleviate it. You can't tolerate their discomfort, so you take on the responsibility of managing it. Toxic people are attracted to empaths like moths to flame, because an empath will feel their pain, believe their stories, justify their behavior. An empath will think, they're not bad, they're hurt. They're not manipulative, they're wounded. And that might be true. They might be hurt and manipulative. Pain doesn't make someone safe. Trauma doesn't justify abuse. But when you're operating from unmanaged empathy, you can't hold both truths at the same time. You can only feel their suffering, which overrides your awareness of your own. There's a concept called emotional contagion, the phenomenon where we catch feelings from others like we catch a cold. For most people, this happens occasionally. For someone with empathy overextension, it happens constantly. And you end up living your life in reaction to everyone else's emotional state, never your own. Toxic people exploit this. They make their emotions your emergency. They know that if they're upset enough, distressed enough, you'll drop everything to fix it. You'll prioritize their feelings over your reality. And you'll call it compassion, but compassion without boundaries isn't compassion. It's self-abandonment. So let's bring this all together, because here's what's really happening. Every single one of these behaviors, the over-explaining, the boundary softening, the fawning, the benefit of the doubt loop, the savior complex, the conflict avoidance, the empathy overextension,
They all have one thing in common. They're all ways of making yourself smaller so someone else can be bigger. They're all rooted in the belief that your worth is conditional, that you have to earn your place in relationships, that love requires you to tolerate what hurts you. And toxic people, they're not looking for equals. They're looking for someone who already believes they deserve less, someone who's already doing the work of diminishing themselves. You don't attract toxic people because you're weak. You attract them because you're strong in all the wrong ways. Strong enough to carry what isn't yours. Strong enough to endure what shouldn't be endured. Strong enough to love people who don't love you back. The question isn't, why do they keep coming? The question is, what am I getting from staying? Here's the truth that changes everything. You're not responsible for why toxic people try to enter your life, but you are responsible for why they get to stay. Every behavior we've talked about today, they were survival strategies once. Maybe they kept you safe as a child. Maybe they helped you navigate an unpredictable environment. Maybe they were the only tools you had. But you're not in that environment anymore, and those tools, they're now liabilities. The real work isn't learning to spot toxic people faster. It's learning to change the signal you're sending. It's building boundaries that feel non-negotiable, not mean. It's learning that conflict isn't dangerous, it's clarifying. It's understanding that empathy is powerful when it includes yourself. When you stop making yourself smaller, stop managing everyone's emotions, stop giving endless chances to people who show you exactly who they are, something shifts, not just in who you attract, but in who you become. You start to realize that the right people, the healthy people, they're not looking for someone to fix them or save them or absorb their chaos. They're looking for an equal, someone with boundaries they respect, someone with a sense of self they admire. And the toxic ones? They lose interest because you're no longer offering what they need. You're no longer playing the game. So here's what I want you to do. Not tomorrow, today. Notice your patterns. When you feel the urge to over-explain, pause. When you want to soften a boundary, hold it. When you're about to give someone the benefit of the doubt for the 15th time, look at the pattern, not the incident. You're not being difficult, you're being clear. And clarity is the one thing toxic people can manipulate. If this changed how you see the relationships in your life, if you're starting to recognize these patterns in yourself and understanding why the same dynamics keep repeating, subscribe, because the psychology we explore next will fundamentally shift how you understand yourself and everyone around you. The hidden behaviors that attract toxic people, they stop being hidden the moment you see them. And once you see them, you can change them. That's where your power lives.